spiritual food for thought. Welcome back to Spiritual Food for Thought. I thank you for joining me once again. This one is going to be kind of a response video to something that's been coming out lately, and that is a guy named Andrew Tate who is apparently converting to Islam because Islam, he claims, is the only true religion in the world. I'm going to play a couple clips of some of his kind of deduction, how he arrived at that point, and then I'm going to add some of my own thoughts. Here we go.
I like to believe that I found scientific proof for God. I think that there's an equal and opposite force. That was one of Newton's laws. And when you understand the evil that exists in the world today, there must be an opposite force to the evil, which has to be God. And once you understand they're truly evil and that people are doing them on purpose, not on accident, you understand that Shaitan exists, which means God must exist. So then you have to find the religion which I believe you feel the most affinity to. Truthfully, I think Islam is almost the only religion on the planet. I look at other religions now and they don't have any red lines. They don't have any non-tolerance. If you're going to sit there and be tolerant of absolutely everything, then you stand for nothing. People say, why did you choose the Muslim religion? I sit and say, name another one. Name another religion where you actually are sticking to guidance and adherence to certain rules to show respect to God. Name one, and you can't, which means it must be the only one, which means it's the right one. I think it's the last religion on the planet.
You think it's the right religion?
I think it's the last religion. So if it's the last true religion on the planet, then it has to be the correct one. Because I don't think
How is it the last one?
It's the last religion because no other religion has boundaries which they enforce. If you will tolerate everything, then you stand for nothing. If your book says X, but you refuse to say the book says this, I'm sick to what the book says. Doesn't matter what the subject is, right? I don't want to get us banned. I think everyone can work it out. If you're a Christian, 99% of Christians are ignoring every single rule inside the Bible.
Can Christians interpret the Bible, you're saying? Like they pick and choose what they want to
they'll try and say, I interpret it differently. I believe in God, but I don't believe in that part. That's not what the book says. It doesn't say ignore half of me. It says follow me. Only Muslims follow their book.
No, true.
So they're the last religion.
So if we contemplate what he says, he's pretty much saying Islam is the only religion that actually has a book being the Quran, that they actually obey. And that's a very interesting belief, a very potentially valid point. And what I want people to realize is that, what the modern church has become was not what it was in Jesus' day. Judaism had already become something that it wasn't supposed to be. Time and time again, you see Jesus telling them, you guys are doing your own thing, you've made your own religion, and you're disobeying what God has said. We find the same thing from the mouth of Paul in Galatians chapter 1, I think verses 13 and 14. He's talking about the Jews' religion and equating that to the tradition of the elders. Then he mentions the Jews' religion again because they are not synonymous. That's not synonymous with the commandments of God. So they were disregarding all sorts of stuff in the Old Testament and adding all sorts of things to it. Then you have modern Christianity come up on the scene, and even with verses in the New Testament like 1 John chapter 5, verses 2 and 3, where it talks about, by this we know that we love the children of God, if we love God and keep his commandments. If we love God, we're going to keep his commandments. His commandments are not grievous. And somehow, even with that, there's so many people who rail in the church, who rail against the commandments of God, and they somehow consider that bondage and legalistic. And, he says, if you love me, you're going to obey me. Love and obedience were always tied together throughout the Bible. But you have the modern church just focusing kind of sort of on the New Testament, but even a lot of the New Testament isn't for them by their own mouth, which is really peculiar. But then they disregard almost in its entirety the Old Testament, to where a bunch of the modern church almost acts like atheists do. If you've ever witnessed to an atheist, which if you're a Christian, if you're a believer, you should try to preach the gospel to every living creature, okay, and make disciples of all nations and baptize them. That would be important. That's part of, New Testament obedience, something we should be doing. And a lot of people don't even do that. But if you've ever tried to bring the message of the gospel to an atheist, a lot of times they'll just rip things out of context with a loose frame of reference to, something in the Bible, and they'll kind of make it look absurd and try to mock you for it. Now, it's something they'd never try to apply their own life, but they just kind of try to mock you for something that says somewhere in the Bible. Well, an interesting thing is if you try to obey more of what God says, you look at a lot of things that he says in the Old Testament, you try to obey them, a lot of people in the modern church will actually act like an atheist in that they'll take these things that they don't think are for us right now, and that they would never think of applying to their own life, and they'll mock and ridicule it. And some of the stuff I've heard is absolutely insane. They'll sit there and look at something like the feasts, which are not the Jewish feasts, okay? They're feasts of Yahweh, of God, the one true creator God of the Bible, and they'll mock and ridicule them like, oh, it's the sin in your life God's concerned about, not the leaven in your kitchen. And it's like, okay, so what idiot came up with this is almost the idea that they present. And it's like, no, that's God. God, your creator, came up with the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And that's actually a type of your Messiah, Jesus Christ. So to mock and ridicule it and treat it like it's some insane, foolish thing, that's the level of disrespect that I believe Andrew Tate's talking about, where people don't even take their own book seriously. That's what the modern church, because of the theological seminaries, because of the modern church, institutional church, doctrines and dogmas, doctrinal statements, they've really boxed a bunch of stuff out where they teach and they train people to ridicule and marginalize, and to the point that they're making fun of commandments that God gave. Like, even if that was only for a certain people, only for a certain time, show some respect. Show some respect. As I began to consider the validity of more of the scriptures, I started watching a bunch of things that were kind of railing against people who were applying Old Testament passages to their life. And there was this undertone in a lot of the videos that I was looking at, a lot of the things where people were, holding the law of God in contempt. Well, when it says, depart from me, I never knew you who work lawlessness, a definition of that is to hold the law of God in contempt. That's not even close to where I want to be. So in all of the discouragement of thinking that the whole book was valid, that the people were trying to bring about, because of that undertone and that attitude where they were making fun. I heard one guy go, he goes, if you think keeping some foolish Jewish feast, and I'm like, you know what, guy, whatever else may be involved in your walk, I'm not saying you're not obedient in other areas or that you don't have a love for God that's displayed in different ways, but whoa, if you're going to take one of his holy appointed times that he created and call it foolish, you've got some serious heart issues besides theological problems, because you're taking something that he made and he created and you're calling it foolish. Is your God a fool? And if that's kind of the underlying conclusion one can draw, then yeah, why not convert to Islam? Then why not be part of something where people actually have boundaries, where they actually apply things from the book that they say to follow? We're slacking because people are following men and they're not following God. If you love God, keep God's commandments. Who gave commandments to Moses? Oh, that was God. He didn't come up with this stuff on his own. Quit trying to divorce yourself from the one who's supposed to be your husband. Okay? From the one who loves you and created you and bought you with the precious blood of his son. Quit trying to divorce yourself from your creator. He's created things for his people. We're supposed to be his people, and it's okay to obey him. There's nothing wrong with obedience. There's nothing wrong with that. So unfortunately, because of the context that Andrew Tate has, been living in, which is the world these days, yeah, I agree. The modern Christian church is doing a horrible job in a lot of ways. You see many things where it says you will not inherit the kingdom of God if this is you, that are given a big green light these days. And I agree, it's a people who doesn't stand for anything. Maybe that's why he says few will find life. Then many there will be who will go in by the broad gate that leads to destruction, and few will actually be saved. For a while I was wondering why so much of that man, Andrew Tate, was being pushed to the forefront, and then a lot of pro-Islamic stuff, then converting to Islam. I'm like, I thought there was going to be something more than just the desires of the flesh and the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh and the pride of life, because there's a lot of that comes with them too. And now we see kind of a greater unfolding of this whole thing. And for certain people, they're going to listen to that conclusion he drew. Well, they're the ones who take things seriously, so it must be right. Well, there are others who do take things seriously, but the vast majority of the modern church doesn't. I agree. And even him, when he looks at Christianity, he goes from anyone claiming Christianity, like Will Smith supposedly, all the way to the Pope. So it's a very broad spectrum of all sorts of stuff that doesn't even fit together well on its own. It's a very splintered faith, modern Christianity, and all the different denominations and everything that goes up as part of it. I think in the opener, the intro to this entire channel, I say, even once you narrow it down to just Christianity, because of all the denominations and all the different factions, you haven't really narrowed it down very much, have you? So please, be led of the Holy Spirit. Search the scriptures daily. Let God reveal to you what his truth is, because every man, whether it's me, whether it's Andrew Tate, I don't care who, your pastor, I don't care. Every man can and will lead you astray. It's just a matter of how often you let them and how far you let them. Be blessed.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.